Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our presentation today on accepted, waitlisted, or denied. I'm Darren Worcester from admission.org, and I will be your host today. I'd like to take a quick minute to just kind of address the temperature in the room, if you will, while we are going to discuss various scenarios that you may find yourself in, whether you've received notifications that you were accepted or that you were waitlisted or unfortunately did not get into your school of choice. We recognize that the vast majority of you are with us today because you probably got news that you weren't hoping to get, or you didn't get the news you were hoping to get. And I just want to say that we understand there's a lot of you here, so it's a common scenario to find yourself in at this point in time. And you are 100% entitled to all the thoughts and feelings that may come with that. Our purpose today is to help you process it and understand it and get a better perspective of your options going forward. And for that, we have the Fay School to thank for being here and helping us make this presentation possible. If you are not familiar with the Fay School, they are a K through 9 day school and a 7 through 9 boarding school in Southborough, Massachusetts. An excellent school. I definitely recommend that you take a look at them if you find yourself back in the school search market. And with us today is Jennifer Weeden. She is the Director of Admission at Fay School. Jennifer, thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Darren, for the opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to speak with families, answer questions, and as you said, sort of help through this process.
Excellent. Thank you. Huge caveat is, we're going to be talking about everything from a general perspective to help you understand how the process works. Any really specific questions you really want to reach out directly to the schools, and don't feel shy about doing so. They recognize that you have questions and they are happy to answer them as well. All right. At that, Jennifer, my first question for you is I was hoping you can kind of talk to us a little bit about what happens on your end when it comes to making admission decisions, what goes into the process and coming to the decision of which students, that are admitted or not.
Great, thank you. Well, I'll start by saying I have about 25 years of experience in independent school admissions. As Darren said, I'm currently at Fay School, but I've been with secondary schools. I've worked with children from kindergarten through grade 12. So I'm trying my best to draw upon a really broad experience when I say that a lot of time and effort and heartfelt connection goes into reviewing every application that we receive. So as you know, it's not a straightforward or easy process. We ask you for a lot. So we look at the essays your student writes, we look at the recommendations that have been submitted on their behalf by their teachers, we consider their interviews, if there were standardized test scores required or entrance exams. Every single component that you submit as part of your application is carefully reviewed by an admission committee. The admission committee will typically include the person who interviewed you and your child. Here at Fay, it includes the head of the division of whatever part of our school your child is applying for. So for example, if you are applying as a 7th grade boarding student in our upper school, then our upper school division head sits in on the process. Sometimes specialty folks from athletics or from the arts department, certainly our director of learning services, if your student has particular learning needs, will have read the file and commented. So it's a large group of people, and what we're doing, our very best, is to assess everything that you've provided. What we're experts in is our school and what our school provides and what kind of students are successful here. So we're looking at everything about your student and doing our very best to assess the match between what's going to be exactly the right next school for your student and the program that we offer.
Excellent. Thank you. Jumping into our major topic, that being the wait list, can you give us a baseline for what is the wait list and how do schools utilize it?
Great. Well, one of the interesting and perhaps frustrating things for families is that there are two terms out there. One is a wait pool and one is a wait list. Almost always in independent schools and private schools, from kindergarten through secondary school, what you really have is a wait pool. So what that means is that students who were considered to be admissible to the school, but for whom there just isn't at the moment a space available, are put into a wait pool of students who are there in the hopes that a space becomes available. The term waitlist gets used a lot, and we use it at Fay, even though I appreciate that it can be frustrating for parents because when you hear list, you can imagine or you're thinking that that's a numbered list, that there's an order, and that you want to be number one on the wait list. But really, what happens is that there are a group of, as I said, admissible students to the school that we don't have a space for at the moment. And I think we're going to talk in a minute a little bit more about the granular way that schools figure out how many students that they can admit. But being in the wait pool means you're there if just the right spot opens, and perhaps if you applied for need-based financial aid, if just the right amount of aid becomes available, that you can be offered a place at the school if a space opens up.
When families receive the notification, are they typically informed, of how the wait list works, whether it's a wait list or a wait pool, or is it fair for them to reach out to the school and ask about that?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine to reach out. I will say most typically it will be a wait pool, and the school will be assessing as they have offered acceptance to students, as they are waiting for those decisions to come back from those families, and then they're looking for places that might become available and the students that they have in their wait pool that they can then make an offer to.
Excellent. Now, this is almost a true or false question. See if you can fact check me on this one. So, my understanding of a weight pool, and this may, unfortunately be a little bit frustrating for parents when you just want an answer of, where your child stands to get in, is that ultimately any child could come out of the weight pool. It almost depends on, or not almost, but it does vary based on what the school is looking to fill. So, just for the sake of a random example, if the band needs a tuba player and your kid is in the weight pool and plays tuba, it might be, you might be the fortunate one to gain admission. Is that effectively how that works?
Absolutely. So, at a coeducational school like Fay, we're looking to balance about equal numbers of girls and boys in all of our classes. So, when it comes down to an opening, your child's gender may play a role. Certainly, if you've applied to boarding schools, your child will need a boarding space in the appropriate dorm to open up. And indeed, at that point, I might have a ninth grade boarding girls space become available, and I know that we're short on field hockey players. So if that happens to be the sport that your child plays, that's going to give you a boost as I look to admit a student off of the wait pool. So once you're there in the wait pool, I think another common question is, what can we do to get accepted and out of the wait pool? And the first thing is really just to hold tight. And the hope will be that a space that fits your child, your family, your financial aid, if that's applicable, opens up.
Excellent. Yes, there are a lot of questions about scenarios for the wait pool slash wait list. Um, I think would be helpful too. Could you talk a little bit more about how and when the school might look to call upon a student from the wait pool or the wait list, in terms of how they factor and how many admission decisions to give, et cetera? Because I think that will really help families understand the probability of getting into a school, or waiting for a decision, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So schools work off of many years of historical data. And what we know is if we have, for example, like if a school happens to have 50 spaces available in their ninth grade for new incoming students, a school will know typically how many students they need to admit in order to fill those 50 spaces. So as you know from your own family experiences, I'm sure you probably applied to more than one school. So students sometimes are holding admission offers from multiple schools. And so as a school, we don't assume that every student that we accept is going to enroll. So we have formulas behind the scenes that we use. So in this very hypothetical example, perhaps a school traditionally has an 80% yield, or 80% of the students that they accept will enroll. So if they want to hit 50 students, maybe they accepted 60. So the first part of the process takes a little longer for families on the wait list, because when that 60th student tells us that they're not going to enroll, that doesn't mean we've had a spot open yet. It's going to take a number of students to tell us that they're not going to come before we realize that we're going to need to admit a few more in order to reach that 50. Darren, did that make sense? Am I explaining that clearly enough?
It did to me, but let me see if I can rephrase it a bit just to make sure everybody understands. So basically, from the school's perspective, you have historical precedents, you know effectively how many students are going to decline an offer and go to another school. And so you've factored that in the offers that you've put out. So the wait list will come into play if the math swings a little bit in the other direction on any given year. In the early term, my next question is going to be how long the wait list can last. And I
Mhm.
think, for families, the reality is that, excuse me, that, if you're getting an offer off of the wait pool, the wait list, it's often due to unpredictable scenarios, other than the fact that you can predict that the unpredictable scenarios will happen, which will be that, some students that you admit over the course of the summer and going into the start of the school year will ultimately decline coming to the school, whether the family, one of the parents gets a new job and they move, or, various things like that that can happen. You're nodding your head, so I think, is that a good rephrase? And can you talk a little more on, when the wait list ends, or does it ever
Sure.
end?
Sure. So effectively, a wait list can remain in place right up until the start of school. So, to your point, once we have gotten through the enrollment period where students have accepted our offer of enrollment, it's always possible for something to change later on, for a space to become available. Um, and I will say that most often, waitlist decisions, families get decisions either right before the enrollment deadline comes up or about a week after. Here in the Northeast, it's most typical for schools to send out enrollment admission decisions on March 10th, and then families have until April 10th to respond. So we're most likely to know about whether we're going to be able to go to our wait list or our wait pool a few days before that deadline or in about a week after that deadline. But if you don't have any other offers and you're willing to keep that question open, you're welcome to stay on the wait list right up until the start of school.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We got a lot of questions. Is there anything we can do to get off the wait list? You did sort of explain that the best policy really at this stage is to be patient. You're welcome to reach out to the school and ask if they can give any insight into where the child might be in terms of a wait pool or a ranked list. But one interesting question I wanted to ask, this one specifically, a parent asked about reclassing.
Mm.
So can you explain what reclassing is for anyone who's unfamiliar with the term? Part A. And part B, is that something where coming back to the school and saying you might be willing to do that could potentially change your enrollment outcome?
Great. So the term reclassing refers to a student who has completed a particular grade and then reclasses or does that grade again at their next school. So they might have completed ninth grade at a particular school and they are applying to reclass or be in ninth grade again at their next school. A lot goes into that decision for families, for students. When it's not unusual at all when new students join Fay School, for example, for them to reclass or enter the class that they have just completed. Reasons for that might include looking to shore up some academics and some results. Perhaps a student has always been the youngest in their class, and this is an opportunity for them to kind of get a reset and find themselves more in the age range of their peers. Perhaps they're athletes, and the opportunity to have another year of growth and development within their sport is appealing. It's a sensitive decision. It's not unusual. You can ask once you've been waitlisted if a school is interested, might have a possibility to reclass for your student. Most typically, if a school believes it's a good option for your student, they will have raised it with you in the application process. A school might consider a reclass request if that happens to be the space they have available, but that's not usually the first inclination. The inclination is to reclass when there's a good reason for it and not simply to have a better chance of filling a spot. But that does vary by school.
Thank you. We had several people ask this question. I think it's worth putting out there. Is there anything you recommend that families don't do at this stage in the process?
Right. Responding to the waitlist offer, letting a school know that you'd like to remain on the list, that you're interested if a space becomes available, asking when you might hear more information. Um, there are families who are tempted to want to check in every day or every other day. That's generally not productive. And I would offer that every interaction that you have with a school sort of becomes part of your application process, and a school wants to know that they can work well with you and have a good relationship. So it feels as though you're sort of not taking the information that they shared or reaching out a little too often. That can have a negative impact. You are certainly often welcome and encouraged to share new information about your student. So if after you got your wait pool or waitlist decision, new grades became available for your student and you want to share that new report card, feel free to do that. But it's not necessary to simply find things that you might want to have added to the application. We know your children are wonderful, and it breaks our heart not to have a space for every student at every school. But sort of being able to be a little bit patient and keep your communications a little more succinct is going to be most helpful in the long run.
Thank you, Jennifer. So another big discussion point is always financial aid. If a student were to get an offer from the wait list, what's the chances that financial aid might still be available to them?
Great. So that's definitely part of the equation. And if your family would rely on need-based financial aid, my hope will be that you will have indicated that on your application to say yes, that you are applying for financial aid, that you applied for financial aid by the deadline and completed that application with all your materials. So if you've done all those things, the school is aware that you have that application. They're aware of your family's level of financial need and will most commonly, if they are able to offer you a place from the wait list, will do that in conjunction with an offer of the appropriate amount of need-based financial aid. A school may occasionally let you know that they have a space but not aid, but we understand that that puts families in a difficult position. So most commonly, it's both things together. So we're waiting to have the financial aid that your family has qualified for and a space for you before reaching out.
It does raise, another question that many families have, knowing that a school doesn't want to necessarily put families in that tough decision. Is there a way to know if a child was waitlisted, because the family was requesting financial aid, or how does that weigh in how they ended up, on the wait list?
Sure. So the vast majority of schools have finite financial aid budgets. So what what happens very typically, what's happened at the schools where I work, is that we go through that initial review of applications without anyone in the room knowing who applied for financial aid and who didn't. So we start out with a group of students who are fully admissible to the school. It's generally a second separate group of people who do the financial aid review. They are looking to aid as many students as they possibly can. They are also looking to ensure that they meet their school's enrollment goals, that they are admitting students that will represent and help the school have a broad, wide, diverse community. So they will consider financial aid, consider whether, again, they're looking to admit as many students on financial aid as they can, but there will be a limit to those budgets. So a student who was deemed admissible that the school is not able to fund may, in fact, receive a waitlist decision for that reason.
Excellent. Thank you. So we've covered a lot on, what goes into making admission decisions, how the wait list is used. And, a lot of folks ask, because they have their decision time that they have to get back to schools coming up quickly, will I find out about, a wait list decision before then? And I think based on our conversation so far is it's not out of the question, but a bit unlikely, waitlist decisions, if I understand you correctly, tend to come later on into the summer. And therefore, so for a family that, received an acceptance from a school that they were interested in, or, even those that find themselves waitlisted on, all of their top choice schools, what's the recommendation for what they should do at this point?
Right. So if you did receive an acceptance at a school that you looked at, that you liked, that has a program that's well suited for your student, where you think your student has a great chance of being happy and being successful, I definitely recommend strongly considering and taking that offer that you have in hand. I'll remind folks that I mentioned a little earlier, we know that families apply to multiple schools. Some students may be in the fortunate position of having multiple acceptances. And until they let each school know that whether they're coming or not, we don't know if we can offer students spots off the wait list. So if you have an acceptance and it's a school that you know your child has a good chance to be happy and successful at, my heartfelt advice would be to take that decision, to let the other schools know that you're no longer interested in being on their wait list, moving forward joyfully and positively with the offer that you have, and sort of not putting yourself or your child through the stress of kind of hoping for something that may not materialize.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a great point. And we definitely encourage families, if you know you're not going to attend a school, you had a great point about that earlier on, letting the school know, because there is a log jam of everything right here. And if you can help alleviate that log jam in one direction, please do so. Um, so I definitely understand, and from everything I've heard from other admissions directors, everybody kind of agrees that the bird in hand is typically the best path to take. As a parent, the part that would play in the back of my mind, that I would have a little bit of anxiety over would be, well, what if I accept a
Mhm.
decision to my second or my third choice school, and then we get an offer letter
Yeah.
in July from, school A, what can happen in that scenario? Can I back out of the offer letter that I took and go to the other school, or am I stuck? What would the options be in that scenario?
Great. So at the vast majority of schools, in order to enroll or to accept an offer of enrollment, you need to pay a deposit and you need to sign an enrollment contract. In my experience, I don't know of schools that are willing to refund a deposit. Typically, a deposit's about 10% of whatever your overall tuition, room and board bill would be. And once you've made that deposit, that belongs to the school. Um, when you sign an enrollment contract, what you're going to want to watch for and be very aware of is what's called the contract binding date. So again, using my own school as an example, we sent those decisions on March 10th. Families have until April 10th to enroll. That once in order to enroll, they need to sign the contract and send a deposit. And then May 15th is Fay School's contract binding date. And what that means is that if you decide before May 15th to go elsewhere, maybe you got that offer off the wait list somewhere else that you were hoping for, you will lose your deposit, but we can release you from your contract. But if you reach out to us on May 16th, your contract has become legally binding and you are legally responsible for the full year's tuition. The reason schools need to do that is on our end, what we're doing to prepare for September is hiring teachers and making commitments so that we have the program ready to accept your student. And so that's why you can't, in July, let us know that you're not going to come because we've invested in having your child with us. So there often is a short period of time that's going to vary by school. So you're going to want to really understand what your contract binding date is before you sign it. And once you make a deposit to a school, I don't know of a school that will refund it. Might be out there, but not that I know of.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's really important for everybody to understand. One other really interesting question, I hadn't seen this one before, so I definitely want to ask it, is can they attend a second visit or a accepted student open house if they are waitlisted?
So, in my experience and at the schools where I've worked, the answer is no. That while you are on the wait list, schools are generally not able to accommodate another visit. But if they are able to offer you a space later on, schools will allow you and will work with you to set up a revisit day for your students. So even if the official accepted student revisit day has passed, if you come off the wait list after that, schools will give you an opportunity to revisit before making an enrollment decision.
So we are about at our halfway point of the presentation, and we have a lot of very important questions coming up. Lots of folks asked about, can we reapply next year, those types of things. And so I'd like to take a quick pause to learn a bit more about Fay School. And for everybody in the audience, I do think it's a bit of kismet that we have Fay School supporting this presentation because they have a unique feature in that they go through grade 9 with their boarding program. I personally, though it's probably not the way Jennifer would describe it, I personally see that as sort of a middle school post-grad year. It is fully a ninth grade year, but an interesting option when you're talking about your waitlist scenarios, especially if you're a student that is making the switch from public to private school or other similar type scenarios where, maybe they part of being waitlisted is they're just a little bit academically behind from their peers. Enough from me. Let me just transfer this over to you, Jennifer, and please tell us a little bit about Fay School.
Great. So Darren, I'm just going to get set up here and share my screen. So my name is Jennifer Weeden. I'm the Director of Admission at Fay School, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to introduce you to our program and community. We're located just about 20 minutes west of Boston, Massachusetts. Fay School was founded in 1866 and was the first junior boarding school in the United States. Our program offers a balance of tradition and innovation. Our curriculum blends the best of longstanding traditions, such as our public speaking program and our emphasis on effort, with innovative approaches to teaching and learning. We're a school of about 475 students in kindergarten through grade 9. We're organized into 3 divisions. Primary school is composed of kindergarten through grade 2. Lower school is grades 3 through 6, and our upper school includes grades 7 through 9. We have day students in kindergarten through grade 9, and we welcome 150 boarding students into our school in grades 7, 8, and 9. Now, our students typically come from about 50 different Massachusetts towns, and our boarders come from about 15 US states and 25 different countries around the world. So we're providing an authentic, multicultural experience for all of our students, inside and outside of the classroom. The work of equity and inclusion at Fay is not theoretical nor abstract. It's grounded in our day-to-day interactions with community members who come from a multitude of different backgrounds. In this context, we focus on nurturing the development of kind, thoughtful people who demonstrate integrity and moral courage. These personal qualities are closely connected by another key distinction of a Fay education, which is what we call Vox Inventum, or Find Your Voice, a school-wide program that fosters public speaking and presentation skills, nurtures self-advocacy, and emphasizes effort, civility, and kindness. Vox Inventum is integrated into classes across the grades and disciplines, and it's woven into the fabric of daily life at Fay. Through this program, students learn how to identify and pursue their interests and passions with confidence and determination. I'm also excited to share Fay's Center for Creativity and Design, a 7,000 square foot space at the heart of our campus for use by all our students. We teach creative confidence through our creativity and design curriculum, so our graduates can be thought leaders and have the confidence to tackle problems around the world that haven't yet been solved, rather than spending their days learning answers that need to be entered onto standardized tests. Arts are woven into the daily experience of every Fay student with music, visual arts, and drama as part of the curriculum at every level. Our upper school offers 11 different music classes, including chorus, concert band, wind, strings, and jazz ensembles, 8 different visual art classes, including drawing, sculpture, ceramics, digital photography, painting, and more. And every student takes drama classes and has the opportunity to try out for our musicals and plays. And at Fay, students don't have to choose between arts and athletics because our schedule provides ample time for both. We offer more than 20 different sports and over 50 different teams in our upper school, which means every student can play the sport they choose at the level that's right for them, from beginners to highly experienced players. Students choose one sport for each of our 3 terms, and athletics take place here daily. With so many offerings and opportunities, we're nonetheless best known for our academic program, which inspires over 100 secondary schools to visit Fay in a typical year in hopes of enrolling some of our graduates. We accept a number of top students into our 9th grade program, which offers a challenging and comprehensive high school curriculum and prepares students for highly selective schools like these. Our secondary school counseling team works to help each student and family apply to a range of well-matched schools, with most choosing to go on to top boarding and day schools in this area. And finally, we take our mission to heart. While our program emphasizes foundational academic skills, we also focus on fostering creative problem solving, critical thinking, and a mindset that will empower our students to make a positive difference in the world. So I do hope you'll want to learn more, and I invite you to reach out so that we may assist you in your search. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. You had a much better way of describing your 9th grade program than my way. I did want to take one quick Fay question. We got a bunch, but one quick one. Somebody's been doing their research on your design thinking global leadership program. Are there specific student dispositions or backgrounds that you're looking for a program like that?
No, we believe that everyone benefits from the process of having a real problem to solve, of iterating solutions, of testing them, building them, working with a group of people to get feedback, improving a design or a concept, and that applies whether you're building something, whether you are writing a paper for an English class, whether you're working away at a math problem. Having the experience to know that there can be multiple solutions to a problem, that you can test it, reframe it, get feedback, try again. Those are skills that serve all of us in life. So a student doesn't necessarily have to have had a background in what schools might talk about, or parents might be familiar with the terms STEM or STEAM, talking about the intersection of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But we believe every student benefits from, and all our students participate in that program.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that and giving us some background on Fay. All right, back to the parent questions that we have, and we're going to move into what I would say is the phase of the discussion that covers questions that both families who are waitlisted and or receive denial notices are applicable to them. And the first one, which I think probably the answer might vary a little bit per the scenario, is, a lot of people want to know, can we reapply next year if we didn't get in this year?
Great. So, yes, schools will be delighted to have you re-enter the process and to apply again next year. If there was specific feedback that they're able to give you, you might hear that you're welcome to reapply, and we look forward, for example, to seeing your student make some steady improvement in their grades, in their academics. But we take very seriously when a family shows a continued interest in the school and reapplies. That's always recommended.
Excellent. I think that goes is a nice lead into our next question, which is really, one parent asks, how do we help our kiddos understand what it means when they're waitlisted, or that they, help them process the feelings around, getting a denial. And, effectively what you've just said is, they've gone through that emotional crash, if you will, once. Like, do we really want to set them up to do it again, is what I would be thinking as a parent. So what are some of the things that parents can do to kind of talk to their children and help them process these decisions?
Sure, that's a great question. And speaking as a parent myself, I know that one of the things that we as parents or guardians put at the top of our list is protecting our children from disappointment. We want our children to have the opportunities to do the things that they want to do, to get positive feedback on the things that they attempt, and whether it is running for a student government position, applying to an independent school. Eventually, most likely your child will be applying to colleges. At some point, I don't know if any of the adults have recently applied for a job themselves, but the job application process these days looks a lot more like the school application process. There's a lot to it. So while we want to protect our children and have things always go well for them, an important part of life is learning how to accept a result that wasn't what you were hoping for, deal with feeling disappointed or frustrated or angry with the outcome, letting go of the idea that it was something wrong with you, wrong with your child, understanding that schools have finite numbers of spaces and financial aid, and that even if you didn't land, there are many other schools out there. And I would encourage you to help your child build that resilience, and for you to help model that resilience, that we don't get everything in life that we hope we will, and that the very best thing we can do is figure out what the next opportunity is that we would like to go after, sort of pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off. The good news is if you do decide to reapply to other schools, you're going to have already gathered a lot of the materials, and it is easier the number of times that you move forward and do it. So I would encourage families and parents, students to have faith, to believe that one outcome, one set of outcomes at one point in time doesn't mean forever, and that life is about learning how to pick up and keep trying.
Excellent. Thank you. So that also leads us in beautifully to our next question. Speaking of picking up and dusting off, for families, I'm seeing it in the Q&A in the chat, people saying, we're waitlisted at all our schools. We don't know what to do next. And folks, who found themselves, without an acceptance for various reasons, what can they do next? What is their next course of action?
Great. Well, I think you in a moment, I hope you talk about the resources that you make available to families. There are lots of schools out there, and once you get past April 10th, if you haven't, assuming that that's a date that's relevant in the market that you're looking at, or whenever you're past the point where your schools have enrolled their families. There are many schools out there and a lot of tools that you can use to research them. So I recommend uh, taking advantage of learning schools that still have openings, reaching out, beginning the application process, and always good to have a backup plan as well. So knowing that if things don't pan out, if you don't ultimately find a school for this September, that you know what your plan will be, and then you can, if you decide to put energy into applying to schools again the following year.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. And yes, we do have some resources from admission.org that can help you in your continued search. A couple things to look at is hopefully by this point you've encountered our school search on admission.org, and it's at search.admission.org. And I'll provide some links in the thread as we continue this discussion. But effectively, what you want to look for at this stage are schools that offer rolling admission. And if you're not familiar with that term, there's basically two types of rolling admissions. There's schools that do rolling admission year round. So from August, September, all the way through, they will continually accept applications and review candidates as they go until their class is full. And many of those are still going. Many schools, conversely, will have a second admissions period, or will reopen admissions, after the initial candidacy. So they'll have sort of I like to think of it as a second admissions period. Some schools even hold spots open after the initial review period because they know they're going to have a lot of great candidates that are going to come along. So um, we have coming, it should be out April 1st, a new filter coming to the admission.org search that will allow you to specifically check off rolling admissions and see the schools that are still accepting applications at this point in time. And what I would encourage you to do is obviously go, it might not be out at the beginning of April 1st, maybe check April 2nd, the way software releases go. But early in April, that filter will be available for you. And when you check it the first time, it may not have a school that, fits the criteria you're looking for. That does not mean all is lost. Schools in that second category will be updating it. Many schools, even that do rolling admissions, since this is a new filter, they're going to have to kind of on the back end of our system check that off. So there will be, long story short, schools will be added to that filter as we go on throughout the spring and summer. So personally, if I were you, I would kind of set a reminder once a week at least to just kind of go and check it, maybe more frequently. Obviously, the further we get into the spring and summer, the more anxious you're probably going to become. I know I would be, over having an answer to what your educational decision is going to look like for the fall. So check that often. The other thing, and important to kind of understand, we just did a survey with schools. Um, Depending on where you are, whether you're looking for a day school or boarding school, there's a lot of variability across the independent school market right now in terms of schools that are received increased applications, schools that are about what they expect, and schools that are receiving fewer applications. So there's a lot of great schools out there that are going to be looking for students and are still looking for students because of this wide variability across the market. So definitely check that out. And the other thing that we do is we help gather a list of students who are still looking and let the schools use that list in email to families that they think are a good match. So I'm going to put a link into the Q&A where you can go and check that. If you go into our system and into the portal, there's a place where you can check your communications preferences to see if you allow those emails or not. And honestly, if you turned it off before, I wouldn't blame you because it can be a lot of emails. But this stage in the game, some additional emails might not be the worst thing in the world if you're getting emails from schools that maybe they're in Seattle and you're in Maryland and looking for a day school. That's not going to be a good fit for you, right? But you can kind of discern with your delete button which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to dig into or welcome to the trash bucket of your email. So I will place those links into the chat, but let me get Jennifer answering another question so I can do that. Moving sort of into the decisions of families, that were not accepted or waitlisted into schools, a lot of people are trying to process, what a denial means, and they're, asking, are there common reasons for denials? I'm almost wondering that, are there any common reasons for denials? So I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, it is the hardest decision that a school makes. I want to assure you that there isn't any admission team out there that is taking that decision lightly. And the reason varies as much by school as by applicants. So it could simply be that the school had so many applications for a particular grade level that it wouldn't make sense and wouldn't be helpful to waitlist 90 students, for example. So, part of what schools try to do with the denial decision, as hard as it is to send it and as hard as it is to receive it, it's clarity. You're not in limbo. You know that the school will not be able to offer you a space, so you have clarity to move on to next steps. Often, there could be a sort of a disconnect between the school's perception of what program will best suit your student. Schools are trying very hard to set their students up for success, to admit students who will be successful in their program. That doesn't mean that your student isn't wonderful and that they don't have terrific qualities that they bring with them, but you and your student may be best served by a program that looks different from what that particular school offers. So that might be a reason that your student was denied a spot. But again, there's every chance that it's a numbers issue, and schools are trying to give clarity to families that either it's just not a fit, or it's just not going to happen for this fall.
Thank you. Can families appeal admissions decisions?
In my experience, schools are not able or don't have a process for a family to appeal a decision. So if a student was denied, the school worked long and hard to make sure that that was the appropriate decision. Probably very welcome to apply again the next year. And again, waitlist leaves the opportunity that a spot might become available, but I don't know of schools that are able to reconsider a denial.
Excellent. Similar question for financial aid decisions. Can families appeal those if they feel the package offered is not going to work for them?
Sure. So every school will have its own process for financial aid reconsideration. So the first step in asking for reconsideration is to let a school know. And typically at Fay, we always ask for this in writing so that we have it in the record. And I think that that's very typical. A school will ask you to explain what might be different in your family's financial situation from the time that you applied for financial aid to this moment? So, has something changed? Might we have misread or misunderstood something in your application? Is there a circumstance that you want to bring to our attention? So that's step one. Step two is letting a school know that you're not able to make it work for your student based on the aid that they offered. Some schools might be in a position to reconsider if they still have funds available. I mentioned right up early on that schools are generally trying to stretch financial aid dollars and to admit and support as many students as they can. That means not every school can meet every family's full level of financial need, but it's certainly fine to ask the question and to ask what the process might be.
Excellent. Thank you. Um, Getting into the final minutes here, just going to speed around some questions for you. A lot of questions, is for families or students. You had mentioned earlier that it is acceptable to reapply and show growth and improvement on, areas that were deemed, necessary. How does a family get that feedback? Can they reach out to a school and ask, what are some effectively feedback on their applications and things that their student could be working on?
Sure. So again, that's going to vary greatly by school and by size of school. So in very general terms, the smaller the school, the more likely they may be able to provide you with more detailed feedback. The larger schools, perhaps not. You're welcome to ask. And schools will do their best to give you information that they can share, but that is going to vary greatly by school.
Excellent. And I would encourage folks, in reaching out to understand and recognize that the admissions teams are really busy right now. So, while they may give you feedback, you may have to wait a little bit on that. Um, if we move into some of the questions that the accepted families have, an interesting one came across the Q&A, and I am as interested to hear the answer on this. So one of the families, I think in reference to our conversation earlier about, having to pay the fee and how that is effectively, non-refundable after a specific date. For international families that have concerns over visa requirements and things that are going on there, if they register and pay the fee, but then their visa doesn't get allowed, is the school going to give some leniency in that type of situation?
Exactly. So here at Fay School, all an international family needs to do is share with us the visa denial letter that they received. It doesn't happen very often. I can understand families feeling apprehensive about that. At Fay School, our policy is if your visa was denied, we will refund and we will negate your contract. Other schools may vary, so that's an excellent question to ask and make sure you understand how that school will handle a potential visa denial.
One quick question, one parent asked, can they defer an admission acceptance, almost like you can, when applying to college?
So, again, speaking from my own experience, uh, I don't know of a secondary or a junior boarding or a middle school that is able to offer a deferral. You can ask. I think it would be unusual. As I said, it's not happened within my experience. The reason it's a little different at the college level. For a younger student, for a student applying to secondary schools, um, we can't really predict what our number of openings will be in a subsequent year. We can't guarantee that we would have a level of financial aid available for a student. It's a time in life, in young people's lives, when a lot changes. So we want to be able to understand where a student is currently in their schooling, in their life, in their experiences. So generally speaking, secondary, middle school, junior schools don't offer deferrals, but you can ask.
Excellent. One of the questions making me smile a little bit just from a parent's perspective, saying their child got into their top school, but waitlisted for my top school. Should we wait a bit? You know, per our earlier conversation, you have until April 10th, is it? But I wouldn't wait much longer than that. I think we got time for one more really big question here. For the families who are accepted, one of the very common questions that we got was, how do we make the choice? We love two schools or three schools to complicate it more. How do we make that decision? It's such a big decision.
Right. Most schools, if it would be helpful to you, are able to connect you. If you don't currently know someone who attends the school, most schools will be happy to connect you with another parent. Sometimes that parent to parent or guardian to guardian communication can be particularly helpful. I think if you already had or didn't have as part of your school search process a good spreadsheet of what each school offers, what their program looks like, how that matches up with your students' interests and needs and hopes. Um, And at the end of the day, I know it's hard. We talk about that a lot as a society. It's getting harder and harder to make decisions because we have more and more choices and more ways to get feedback. But I think there's real value in making sure that your student feels really empowered in this process. And if your student has a clear sense of a school that feels most right to them, I would ask you to really consider honoring that. I think there was a part of a question before about, oh, I really liked this school, but my student liked that school. It's going to be your student's experience. So giving them some agency in the process. And at the end of the day, a school experience is what a student makes of it. A school experience will be wonderful, challenging, encouraging as much as your student and your family brings to that process. So embracing the choice, knowing that any school can be wonderful if you put your heart and soul into it, and um, just trusting there's even though you think there's three that you're trying to choose from, I bet that if you all sit down at the dinner table, there's one school that everyone is kind of pulling for.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I see the questions coming in asking for our recommendations on schools that still have openings. Unfortunately, we don't really have insight into the specific schools. What I would recommend, if you use the search, look for schools that have criteria that matches what you're looking for, aka if you're looking for a day school or you're looking for specific programs, that sort of things, and go to the school websites because they will often say right on their entry admissions page as to whether or not they accept applications on a rolling basis or after the application deadline. And they usually have a contact email you can reach out and just ask, are you still accepting applications? All of that is very fair game for you to do. And of course, after April 1st, come and check the search and we'll have a filter that will specifically show you schools that are still looking. So that said, thank you to everyone for attending the presentation today. I hope we've given you more to think about and understand and help you process your next steps and what you want to do. And we, of course, wish you the best as you continue on the journey to determining what is going to be the best fit for your child. And Jennifer, thank you very much. This presentation wouldn't have been impossible without you and Fay School's support. You provided such great advice today, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, everyone, and best of luck.